Muslim acceptance in the West. Although not all Westerners share the same perspective on Muslims, many have uncertainties when it comes to accepting Muslims into their countries. Westerners' negative perception on Muslims is characterized with unnecessary violence and oppression. This being said, threats and warnings of the Muslim enemy and the various Islamic terrorist groups are not new in the Western world. These doubts were developed by different events such as 9/11 and Islamic terrorist groups like ISIS. However, specific occurrences and people do not define a whole society. Muslim acceptance in the West is now more important than ever as the rising conflicts in the Middle East have caused an influx of Muslims to migrate to the West. So with the increasing number of the Muslim population in the West, the question of whether Westerners should have complete acceptance of Muslims in the West comes up, and disregarding previous outlooks and reserves on the Muslims, the Westerners should welcome and embrace the Muslims into their society. So two stimulus materials played a vital role in shaping my argument, and those are the primary one is the Advocates Towards Muslim Women in the West, which is an interview with Laila Lagoud by the Ageless Society. So this interview describes the experience of the Muslim woman in the West, including backlash and stereotypes. The similar experience and impacts have influenced whole Muslim societies throughout the West. So the second one is the historian essay participated by Arthur Schlesinger Jr. And so this text discusses analyzing past events. And in order to understand the context of Muslim people in the West, it is important to understand past events that helped fashion these specific stereotypes. So how we view these historical events plays a significant role in developing the different the current general perceptions on Muslims. So the Muslim religion, first and foremost, the Muslim religion is peaceful. So despite many associating Islam with violence and terrorism, the Muslim religion advocates for kindness and harmony. The Holy Islamic scripture, the Quran, states that one should always be kind and peaceful and should never inflict violence upon others unless necessary. So although there are many Islamic movements and extremist groups that utilize violence to reach their political goals and given political leaders in the West the opportunity to present a negative image of Muslims, the Muslim religion prohibits such acts. In the US, a white male is more likely to perform a terrorist act than a Muslim, and that is because Muslims follow the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, both who preach against violence. So regardless, Muslims in the West are kind and peaceful, which means they help in creating safer communities in the West. So additionally, the Muslim religion advocates for education. Many Muslim scholars have had extremely influential contributions in the past, some of which include Ismail al-Jazari, Abbas ibn Finas, and Avicenna. So al-Jazari was a polymath, as he was a scholar, inventor, a mechanical engineer, and mathematician, and more. He's credited for countless mathematical advancements. Also polymath, Abbas ibn Finas was an inventor, physician, chemist, engineer, and more. And finally, Avicenna as a Muslim physician who is credited as being the father of early modern medicine. So one thing that all of these influential scholars have in common is that they were all motivated by religion. They were all Muslim and sought to increase their knowledge for the Quran advocates for expanding one's knowledge and education. Many Muslims have followed in the paths of those great scholars. Similarly, many Muslims in the West will continue to strive for higher education. This is beneficial to the Western society, as with a higher education, Muslims can better the society by aiding in creating various advancements in maths, science, and other fields. Thus, Muslims in the West will help lead the Western society into the future through their dedication to education and knowledge prompted by Islam. So when looking for a solution, the primary purpose is finding one that emphasizes destroying existing stereotypes as well as protecting Muslims. Therefore, my solution is that implementing laws that will prevent harassment of Muslims and encourage interaction with Muslims. So a few ways that this solution could be implemented include arresting everyone who harasses a Muslim, and this could include various punishments, not just arresting, and holding conferences where Muslims can teach about what their religion advocates so the non-Muslims and Westerners would have a better understanding of their motives. And then creating more events where Westerners could have increased interaction with Muslims in the West, which would mean that the non-Muslims in the West would be able to better understand the Muslims, and then thus the fear would go down and the negative stereotypes would also slowly diminish. So as with all solutions, risks exist. So two risks for this solution is the existence of anti-Muslim extremists as well as the extended time. So anti-Muslim extremists will always exist, as will Muslim extremists, and we cannot help this even by passing laws, etc. However, this just means that complete acceptance of Muslim society will not be achieved, but we can get very close. And then the other one is that laws and rules could take a very long time to pass and be enforced throughout society. And this would cause a delay in the process of accepting Muslims into the Western world. However, organizing events such as conferences that promote interactive relations between Muslims and non-Muslims only take a few weeks to plan and organize. And so this would be an easier way to improve Muslim acceptance in the West. So despite the risk, this choice is the best solution, as it will help achieve as close to complete acceptance of Muslims in the West as possible. And then these are my works cited and some of my sources. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions. How did your research evolve as you moved through the process? Did you go in a different direction than you originally planned?
Yeah, so when I started, I wanted to see, changing the Westerners' perception on Muslims. So I started looking up, their current perception and how it has evolved throughout time. However, as I found that, overall it's been fairly negative, as, repeated events have caused the perception to revolve around violence and oppression. So therefore I changed my subject to including all Muslims into the society and having them be accepted.
Okay. So what advice would you have for other researchers to consider this topic?
A piece of advice I would have for other researchers considering this topic is to not look so much into statistical data, but look into, it's important to look at statistical data, but it's more important to understand, the perspectives of Muslims and non-Muslims, because it is also very critical to consider that why some non-Muslims have those doubts. So as I discussed, I do recognize the reasons behind those doubts. However, these seem to change as Muslims do not always fit those stereotypes.
All right.